together. We raise our hands and hail our flag, the maple leaf forever.
Well, thank you all for coming to the Victoria Day soapboxing. Standing on a soapbox. You guys know what it is. And this is my speech, which I'm going to be giving to this wonderful crowd of people.
And our country's call will cheerfully obey. Tramp, tramp, tramp the boys along.
Come all ye bold Canadians. So was sung the Canadian people during the War of 1812, when across our border did tread an invading army of Americans, seeking the subjugation of Canadian people. This ditty was known as the Bold Canadian, and has been a mainstay of our folk music since the war that led it to being written. Nowadays, however, the Canadian people are yet again being subjugated, our counts being frozen, our acts of protests declared as acts of war. And it is our own government, not an invading army, that are the ones to blame. In the War of 1812, it was easy to be bold. It is easy to gather confidence when facing a foreign foe. But when we are faced by the treason of our own elected representatives, it is blatant that we are suffering from deeper struggles. We all know it. We're all struggling. We all feel it. We're angry. But we have been powerless to enact the change that is needed to overcome the Prime Minister who thinks himself a despot. The way it has been corrupted today by liberal politicians, our system is rigged against us. Once a country of dignity, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is running us into the deepest pits of disgrace that has ever been seen by any nation on this earth. The Prime Minister is a criminal. This is a matter of record. With the weed charity SNC Lavalin, we know he is embezzling funds and selling our country to interested partners. But really, can you blame him? Canada's system has been constructed into one that rewards greed and punishes virtuosity. This was not always the case, however, and you know, if there were some older people here in the audience, some may even be alive to remember a day when this was not the case. Nevertheless, avarice, greed, it is something that the devil has crafted into the strongest motivator. The system that is set up by the government is built on 4-year cycles. A 4-year cycle of election, bickering, deliberating, voting, bureaucracy, and treason. We have a parliament where nothing gets done. And what does get done is only done so because the CEO of Loblaws paid off both sides to vote for it. We supposedly live in a nation that values democratic processes. But when grassroots Canadian people merely disagree with the ruling elite, it is a national emergency. This is because our supposed democracy is only about the appeasement of the various interested parties. It has been this way since its inception in ancient Athens. Only now, the only thing that's changed is the scale and the importance of the lobbyists. In Canada's years past, the people did have a say, because we were the strongest lobby. But as time has gone on and our purchasing power has been diminished, we don't have the money or the voice to outweigh the people who really run the show. The wild thing is, here in Canada, we have a governmental office specifically to inhibit this from happening. Our Governor General's whole purpose is to protect Canada from a Prime Minister who tries to run away with the country. And for many years, this rule succeeded. But like many things here in Canada today, the dignity of that office has been stripped away, just like its power. During the First World War, our boys were sent overseas to protect protect the dignity of the empire against the Central Powers. And when they prepared to climb onto the boats and nobly lay down their lives, they were met by the Governor General. Prince Arthur, the Duke of Connaught and Strathearn, he was a Governor General who had fought on the front lines against the Fenians, Irish Americans who invaded Canada in the late 1870s. The Governor General understood the fear that men would face going into a battle and had served alongside Canadians in war before. He gave them the encouragement they needed to make Canada one of the most infamous forces of the First World War. So how is it then? Our Governor General is so disgraced that I bet most of you probably can't even name her. And before, I bet the only reason you know who she was because she beat her house guests. So in the 1920s, Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King, who was the Prime Minister during World War II, led a minority government. And he had made an agreement with the Governor General of the day, who was a veteran, frontline veteran of World War I, that he would not force an election in the case of no confidence. He would cede the government to the Conservatives. But when in 1926 came and he was facing a vote of no confidence, he went to the Governor General and he demanded, the Prime Minister demanded to the Viceroy of Canada, he said, call an election. The Governor General reminded Mackenzie King, he said he had an agreement, and he handed the government over to the Conservatives. Immediately following, Mackenzie King resigned, and he went over to Britain and demanded in front of the British Parliament that they amend the Statute of Westminster to reduce the power of the Governor General. He compelled the British Parliament to take away that power, leaving us the hollow shell of a station we have today. This greed for power, it overrules any respect the Prime Minister may have for his office, and definitely more so than the people. I'd like you to imagine the quintessential Canadian in your head. What are you thinking of? A Mountie? A lumberjack? Coal miners? Fishermen? All of these are former institutions of pride, industries built on the backs of Canadian settlers that constructed this nation from bare wilderness into the city you see today. But these industries are being sold out, shipped overseas, or importing those from far away to do those jobs for us. Then they act like those lumbermen, those pioneers, they never existed. Canada was always the way it is today. It has never been different. And if you think otherwise, well, you're racist. True. You're a human rights violator. In our schools, they don't teach us the stories of valor that make up our history. It's all the shame that we must feel for being descended from such disgusting ancestors. We don't hear the tales of General Brock, Wolfe, or even Montcalm. This is all colonist mumbo-jumbo to be thrown away into the trash bin of history. We shall not be proud of the good things that come from Canada. The labor of those who went down into the mines, drove the logs, or tilled the soil is because they want to dishearten us and uproot us. When they uproot us, we don't remember the songs of bold Canadians who fought to protect this country against all odds. Because if we knew, we might fight to protect our country from them. So we must take care to keep our sacred history in mind, because we must respect our elders and the shared wisdom of all of our collective forefathers. It beats any new thing they come up with today. Because every day, they import thousands into this country. People who don't have ties to this country. People who don't desire to foster this country and renew it. They think that Canada is an economic zone, a cash cow to be milked. We're not a proud people with a prouder heritage. We're a fringe minority who needs to lay down and die. This is why they levy tax against us, cancel our industrial projects and pipelines to ship them across the seas. It's a globalist agenda that seeks to divorce us from our birthright. Say that we owe our inheritance to the whole world. Our sacrifice means nothing because they feel that the sacrifice is owed to the altar of their world government. They want to change this country, come up with a new Canada that is official multiculturalism. But we were just fine before. And in my heart lives that Canadian lumberjack, burling down the white water, the pioneer Mountie, building a fort on the Canadian plains, or the brave settlers that constructed this braver nation. In my heart lives the bold Canadian, who will not stand for the rights of his country being molested by foreign interference or internal treason. Queen Victoria, whose day I speak to you all on now, signed our Constitution for the protection of our national liberties and to construct a government to protect her people in North America from falling victim to this sedition. All of us need to stand up and inhabit the soul of the bold Canadian. For if we don't protect the rights and the values of our Constitution set forth by Queen Victoria, then we will continue to degrade and fall victim to a Prime Minister who wishes to exalt himself above the station of his office. Now, like General Brock, the man who led our Canadian forces against the invading beliefs of an American republic, we now need to lead ourselves to freedom from the poisonous beliefs of the Ottawa dictatorship, who divorces our country from all that had made it unique, proud, strong, and free.
Here, here.
Very good, Connor. Very good.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
We raise our hands and hail our flag, the maple leaf forever.
Why not, eh?
Yeah,
We did it.
That's right.
guys, we're having another speech. Woo! Go Fraser.
All right. Well, welcome. I enjoyed Connor's speech. I don't think I can disagree with any of it. I think he probably has his history down pretty well. And I don't want to take away from what he has said. But just want to spend a couple of minutes here on the economic side of why we are where we are in our economy and in the North American economy and even the Western world's economy. Europe also, I include in that, and Japan. And what's happened, our problems today, economically speaking, began in 1913. The real problems with the beginning of the Federal Reserve. And it goes back before that to the Bank of England, where they learned to have fractional reserve banking and are able to lend out more money than they have on deposit. And this has been going on for years and years and years. But it really got momentum in 1913 when somewhat surreptitiously the heads of the banks, heads of the big banks in the United States convinced the very small showing of the U.S. Congress to approve of the Federal Reserve System, and that thus began the printing of the U.S. currency, and then after the Second World War, it got worse, and so today, what happens when you print currency is it works in the beginning, it stimulates the economy, and people like the idea of subsidized rent on money. They get low rent on money, which is interest rates. And Federal Reserve interest rates are low rent on money. And the Bank of Canada, I don't know if Connor would be able to go into this with with zeal, I'm sure, but the Bank of Canada deserves some looking into its history, because it too has followed the Federal Reserve just as like a lapdog. We're so close to the United States that they have been printing just as much currency as the Americans have. If they weren't, the proof of that is that if they didn't, the value of our currency would be much higher than the American dollar. But we've had to keep our Canadian dollar lower than the American dollar so we can sell our Canadian product. So that's where we're at today, and it's been going on long enough that the dislocations of assets in our country, I don't want to talk about America anymore. I'm interested in trying to help Canada. I'm not a world saver. I try to work within the country that we know. And it's been going on to the point where assets have been dislocated, and you get people who are smart. Some people are actually almost smarter than the government. If they weren't, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. They're more interested in making money than donating their time to Canada, and they have bought the most stable assets in Canada, namely homes and farmland and productive land. They have bought that up because they know that the price is the least likely thing that the price is going to fluctuate on. And then they leverage it. And they go to the bank and they try to get the best credit rating possible. And then they go to the bank and get as much money as they can with that asset, borrow against that asset, and buy more and more of it. So now you've got farmers that have become filthy rich, because that's exactly what they are doing. They're taking the most stable asset in the country and borrowing against it, and going out and buying more of it, and then borrowing more and buying more, and so they're now that's where you get the 1%. The 1%, they have bought the productive assets of our country, and but it's not just them, it's the banks that have financed them, and it's their cheap loans that have been subsidized to them. They get these cheap loans, and the big corporations can expand even more. And people who don't know the game are pushed out of the game. And the majority of people don't know the game, and they're pushed out. So that's where it's coming from. And also where we're headed, I don't like to make complete predictions, but the central bankers, Lord Rothschild, Baron Rothschild, in the early 1800s, I think it was, or late 1700s, is famously, a very famous quote. Everybody deserves to try to remember the quote. He said, "Give me the control of a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes the laws." And that's where we're at right now. The banks have the power to, if they print currency, if the banks print currency, we will have hyperinflation. If they stop printing currency, we will have a depression. But they cannot have a healthy economy anymore. It's almost impossible. There's been too much money put into the economy, so it's almost impossible to have it healthy. What we need to do, really economically speaking, is to reverse what they did. And that is to stop printing money. And we would go into an immediate recession, and we would have to have, I'm good, Connor. Okay, thanks. We would go into a a real slump, but we'd have to have the one program we would have to have is for the people on the street, the homeless, the people who don't have shelter, that would protect them from that situation. That's the one thing we would have to spend on. And everything else would temporarily be suspended, and everybody else who had any money in the bank at all would have to fend for themselves. But it would get us out of that mess, the mess that we are in. So the other actually, it's not a solution. That's the only real solution that would get us out of the funk that we are in. The other so-called solution, which is not a solution, is to keep on inflating the currency and hyperinflate the currency. And if the currency is hyperinflated, it will end up as a depression anyway. It just prolongs what we're doing until we do get the depression.
Yeah.
And so all this actually can lead to, I hate to be so darn negative, but all this will actually lead to more control. When government is pressured and pushed, they push back. They have the power and the ability to push back. And when they feel like they're under pressure, they put pressure on the people. And that's what we can probably expect. More and more pressure on the government to act certain ways, so that they're just people also. The people that run the government are only people, and they react like when they're threatened, they react with counter threats. So it's not pretty, but like Lord Rothschild said, what he said, he controls. He doesn't care who makes the laws. They have the total power whether they're going to print or not print. They have the total power whether power is powerful. And they have the total power whether they're going to print or not print. That means whether they're going to have a hyperinflation or a depression. And then it's either a hyperinflation and then a depression, or just a depression now. Yeah. That's as much as I can kind of assume for now. But if I was wanting to get rich today, there's a couple of requirements. But I would boost my credit rating. Any debt that you have, pay off your debt and try to get the credit rating. These banks have their own culture in our economy, and either you have a good credit rating or you have a bad credit rating, and that's all they care about. And what you want to do is try to get a good credit rating, and then borrow. Then you get like the farmers have done. You get an asset that is probably not going to fluctuate as much with the economy as say penny stock or something like that. You want a solid asset, and then you can leverage that asset. You go to the bank and borrow against that asset, and try to build that asset. The asset has to have some kind of income production, so you can pay the interest on the borrowing. But if you could get in that position where you have an asset that's making some kind of a return, and it's a stable asset like land or homes, the things that people really need. Maybe even precious metals. I'm not sure about precious metals. I haven't thought about that enough yet. But precious metals don't have an income. Whereas you can rent a house, you can farm the land, you can try to grow something on the land. So those things, even if it's just junk land that has potential, it's not swamp. It's not swamp, but if you take down the trees or whatever, you can grow something. And that's where there's a possibility of getting ahead, even in a hyperinflation. Yeah. So Thank you.
Thanks, Fraser.
Flag the maple leaf forever.